So, there's going to be a Star Trek Starfleet Academy TV series set in the Star Trek Discovery future. Amazing. I just can't wait for that. How about you? Well, some of us are old enough to remember the live-action and space simulator video game Star Trek Starfleet Academy from 1997 by Interplay. Interplay made some fantastic Trek games back in the day. Anyway, William Shatner, Walter Koenig, and George Takei were all in that game, reprising their roles as Kirk, Chekhov, and Sulu. It was a brilliant game, and it was followed up by the sequel, Klingon Academy, some years later. Now, obviously, the game isn't technically canon, but there had been a plan for a Starfleet Academy movie. In fact, it was meant to be the original plan for Star Trek VI. Now, as you know, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, fantastic movie. It was the swan song for the original series cast. It was their sixth and final feature film, released in 1991. And it told the story of what was essentially the wall coming down in space, with the Klingon Empire in serious trouble due to a Chernobyl-type incident, the destruction of Praxis, a key energy production facility, and the ensuing environmental fallout. An uncomfortable peace treaty between the Klingons and the Federation must be negotiated. But not everyone wants this peace. But the original plan for Star Trek VI was very different indeed. Producer Harve Bennett had considered an earlier concept that Ralph Winter had for Star Trek IV. The film was going to be told in flashback, with Dr. Leonard McCoy speaking to a group of cadets and telling them the story of how the original series crew first met at Starfleet Academy. The idea was likened to being a kind of Top Gun in space. Younger actors would obviously play the roles of Kirk, Spock, Scotty, McCoy, Chekhov, Sulu, and Uhura. It goes without saying, younger actors in these roles would also be, not nearly as expensive. The studio needed the film to be made on a smaller budget. The story would focus on a conflict that the characters had to overcome together, a villain that they all had to defeat, and then they would go their separate ways before meeting again many years later. Now, what's interesting is that essentially that's what we got, kind of, with Star Trek 2009, albeit without the flashback part. We saw younger actors playing our heroes and meeting in Starfleet Academy. This original Star Trek VI even had a plot point about how Kirk's father, George Kirk, was a pilot of a warp ship, and he was lost on a test flight and presumed dead. George Kirk would appear in the opening few minutes of Star Trek 2009, and he sacrificed himself to save the USS Kelvin crew, including his newborn son James Kirk, from the time-traveling Romulan Nero. I actually think those opening few minutes, the battle between the Kelvin and the Narada, it's probably the best part of the entire film, if I'm honest. Now, at this point, if you've watched my channel for a few years, you likely know where I stand with the J.J. Abrams prequel movies. I'm generally not a fan of reboot prequels that go back and show us the younger versions of a cast of characters. I thought doing it once or twice with the X-Men movies was enough. I liked First Class, I liked Days of Future Past, but I will always prefer the original ones. The issue with bringing in new actors to play younger versions is that you're always going to be comparing their performances. Although James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are great actors and they brilliantly play Xavier and Magneto respectively in their own way, they don't really feel like they're connected to the performances of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. That's not a bad thing necessarily. It's not a criticism. It's just, I don't really feel like they're playing the exact same people. Likewise, I never felt that the Star Trek 2009 prequel characters were really tied to the original characters. The writing, the performances, the direction of it all, it's all much more contemporary, it's very different. And I also think that the dialogue for the characters just feels too contemporary millennial. Like, they don't really behave like professional Starfleet officers. There's way too much snark and backchat. What's interesting is that this Top Gun in Space Starfleet Academy film was meant to try to keep the original series characters in play while retiring the older actors who were becoming increasingly expensive to hire. Like I say, new actors would be much cheaper. So if the film had have been successful, it's likely that this new younger cast would have continued in the roles of Kirk, Spock and McCoy and the others, with new feature films of their own throughout the 1990s. And that's very much worth considering because you can really think about what could have been. What would have happened to the Next Generation cast? Would their films even have been made after the Next Generation had finished in 1994? If Paramount had felt that they already had a winning formula with a Star Trek prequel series, almost certainly there wouldn't have been enough money to produce two different film series at the same time. So it's very possible the Next Generation films would never have been made. But I'm actually glad that this Star Trek Starfleet Academy prequel movie never got made, because we would never have gotten the brilliant Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. It was a vastly improved film compared to the lackluster Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, and it gave the original series cast the chance to shine one last time, to go out with dignity, and just have a great feature film of their own with a fitting send-off for the crew. But it also told an intelligent and politically meaningful story with a profound and timely allegory. The film also made a lasting contribution to canon, establishing the basis of the peace between the Federation and the Klingon Empire with the Khitomer Accords, a major event in the franchise history which would be mentioned many times in future series. But nevertheless, a Star Trek Starfleet Academy TV series is on the way, one set in a distant future, spun off from one of the most polarizing Star Trek series ever made, Discovery. I don't really have an awful lot of hope for this new series, if I'm honest. Even if the show turns out to be decent, which is possible, I'm not holding my breath. I'm just not interested in a Starfleet Academy story. I'm not interested in a bunch of university cadets attending lectures and training to be Starfleet officers. What I want to see is already fully qualified officers on starships in space, exploring the final frontier and boldly going where no one has gone before. But hey, when was the last time Star Trek fans really got what they wanted? I can't really remember. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.